Welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Crimson, and we gotta talk about LGBTQ plus narratives and the X-Men. Mostly because there are still people who don't understand metaphors, and some people who don't understand that we have a right to exist. So let's talk about The Last Stand, specifically the Rogue being cured part of it, and Days of Future Past, the Sentinels being used to hunt down mutants part, and let's see if we can leave this episode a little wiser and a little less douchebag-esque. Except for me, because being an asshole is my hashtag brand. Okay, so The Last Stand. Let's start out with how dark this actually gets. For example, Scott is straight up killed by Jean, just wiped from existence. Sorry, I guess I should have said spoilers for a movie that came out in 2006. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is that Rogue's subplot is all about the mutant cure. Let's focus on that. Rogue, whose power literally hurts people, is excited about the cure mostly because, hey, then she could kiss her fucking boyfriend without killing him. Really, the only person she can touch? Wolverine. And he still gets woozy and probably passes out when she does. But before I get to talk about that, we need to talk about how the X-Men are a metaphor for minorities and always have been. Sarah Century did an excellent article for Sci-Fi where she explains how the X-Men are a metaphor for queer people, but also acknowledges the roots of the metaphor itself. The early years of the X-Men were fairly low on significant social commentary beyond the basic elements of its premise. Indeed, the initial comparison between Xavier and Magneto and MLK and Malcolm X gives an extremely lopsided view of the beliefs of both activists. Magneto being painted as an extremist and mutant supremacist, and comparing that to Malcolm X is obviously problematic, as Malcolm X wasn't doing things like attempting to knock the Earth off its axis with the power of magnetism, nor did MLK's outlook bear the same naivete as Professor Xavier's. If we detach the X-Men from this notion that it in any way resembles these real-life people and scenarios, we are given a cast of relatable characters who experience a fictionalized version of oppression, and that has drawn countless people to the franchise that experience the real-world equivalent but without the cool superpowers. And yes, we could also point out more parallels and allegories within the X-Men. In the 90s, the legacy virus could be coded as the AIDS virus right when it was killing a lot of people, even really cool queer people like Freddie Mercury. But back to Rogue. It's weird to have a subplot with her, as the cure is something that can represent either conversion therapy or even detransitioning. But you can't touch people without the cure, and that's a weird power to have as an Alphabet Mafia metaphor. I don't even know a queer person who can kill people with just a touch. But that is on the gay agenda to figure out. We're working on it. The cure is something she wants because she has what I'll call an imperfect mutation. Not that it's a bad one. It's imperfect because it drains another person or harms them in order for Rogue to use her mutation, and she can't turn it off. And this isn't Rogue's fault. I want to make that quite clear. That's how her X gene manifests. Just like how people are just born homosexual or any other part of the Alphabet Mafia. It isn't because of anything they did, because baby, they were born this way. However, given how her mutation works, is it little wonder why she wants to take the cure? It's frightening to think about, but when everything seems like it's against you, can you really blame her for wanting to touch other people? I would argue that, like Storm, there's nothing to cure. But until you walk a mile in her shoes, can you say that Rogue is wrong for wanting the cure? She may not be a mutant anymore, but that doesn't matter because she's doing it so that she can touch the people she loves and express her feelings. And that's something she wants because her mutation is hurting her friends and family. I guess you could make the argument that she will no longer be a mutant, but she would still know the struggle of being one. So, being accepted into society may be a goal of Rogue's, but she will still have the experience of being a mutant. In the end, Rogue takes the cure, but she gets to touch Bobby and rekindle their relationship, ending the film as Storm takes over Xavier's school as headmistress. My point here is that Rogue is a weird allegory for conversion therapy or detransitioning, because her powers hurt people. She isn't like other mutants. Storm can talk about nothing being wrong with her, but Storm controls the weather. That could potentially hurt people, but Rogue can't touch people at all without at worst killing them, or at least harming them. Trying to make an allegory between Rogue's situation and conversion therapy is actually really stupid. Because I don't know a single person of the Alphabet Mafia who can just kill somebody by touching them. Again, we're working on it. So now we have Days of Future Past. This is a loose adaptation of the comic book saga with the same name. The movie opens on a dystopian future where mutants are being put in concentration camps with the humans who dared to even help them. Most of the X-Men get killed in one way or another by the Sentinels, which were invented by Bolivar Trask. So the remaining X-Men decide to send Wolverine, because he's the most popular mutant, back to the past where Magneto is in the Pentagon for murder. I love that Magneto was trying to save JFK from assassination because he was a mutant. That makes way more sense than him murdering JFK. The way that dude could totally get it, I wouldn't be surprised. In the future, Sentinels hunt mutants to eradicate them. And as we know, mutants are a queer metaphor, so what does that say about the future? But it's more than that. It's about isolating the mutant gene. That's how the Sentinels hunt. For anyone who has thought for more than a few minutes about the ongoing hunt for a gay gene or broader genetic basis for homosexuality, this narrative should give pause. While it's unlikely, though not unimaginable given events in certain parts of the world, that gay-hunting death machines would be construed on the basis of such a discovery, it is not at all impossible that parents, or indeed whole governments, might decide to use the knowledge to abort or otherwise prevent the birth of gay children. And really, isn't a coolly delivered test result and subsequent procedure in some ways more terrifying than a fire-breathing automaton? The AIDS epidemic already wiped out much of a generation of gay men, but the discovery of a gay gene could, if handled carelessly, preclude the possibility of more of any gender. Yes, in a world of mutants, or in our real-world case, queer people, there are people hell-bent on erasing us, no matter the cost to what we contribute to society. And I think that's probably the scariest thing about Days of Future Past. It's not that the Sentinels will kill all the mutants, it's that the real-world application of how people treat queer people is always going to be scarier than what we put on screen. There is no gene for LGBTQ+, though. I was born to straight, cisgendered people. I still became an asexual, non-binary ball of chaos. People are trying to police LGBTQ+ identities. And by people, I mostly mean politicians, the straights, and people who believe propaganda. And not just here in the United States. There are people being oppressed for being gay, asexual, bisexual, transgender, and countless other queer identities. But what's interesting is that younger generations don't seem to care about labels and want to embrace people for who they are. Ambrosino goes into a bit of the future to come. Once upon a time, heterosexuality was necessary because modern humans needed to prove who they were and why they were, and they needed to defend their right to be where they were. As time wears on, though, that label seems to actually limit the myriad ways we humans understand our desires and loves and fears. Perhaps that is one reason a recent UK poll found that fewer than half of those aged 18 to 24 identify as 100% heterosexual. That isn't to suggest a majority of those young respondents regularly practice bisexuality or homosexuality. Rather, it shows that they don't seem to have the same need for the word heterosexual as their 20th century forebears. Debates about sexual orientation have tended to focus on a badly defined concept of nature. Because different sex intercourse generally results in the propagation of the species, we awarded a special moral status. Why judge what is natural and ethical to a human being by his or her animal nature? Many of the things human beings value, such as medicine and art, are egregiously unnatural. At the same time, humans detest many things that actually are eminently natural, like disease and death. If we consider some naturally occurring phenomena ethical and others unethical, that means our minds, the things looking, are determining what to make of nature, the things being looked at. Nature doesn't exist somewhere out there independently of us. We're always already interpreting it from the inside. And obviously there are allies out there. I'm not saying everyone hates queer people. I'm just saying with the way that the trans conversation has gone in recent years, why is anyone really surprised with how politicians are treating trans people? Doing the bare minimum to help, or worse, just ignoring it as people yell about drag shows or trans people being not real people, or, how people like myself don't exist because there are only two genders. The problem you run into, though, oppressed people will fight back. We get more vocal, we organize. Erin Reed of Erin in the Morning is an excellent source for LGBTQ+ activism and news of what's happening. I put the link to her Substack in the description. I'm glad we have movies like this to show us the potential futures, and that should scare you, because first they came for the middle class, and I did not speak out because I wasn't middle class. Then they came for queer people, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't queer. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Queer people have always been here. Marsha P. Johnson, Giovanni Di Giovanni, Alvin Ellie, Marquis de Sade, Sir Francis Bacon, Jinx Monsoon, Horace, James Baldwin, Jean-Baptiste Lully, Freddie Mercury, Socrates, David Bowie, H. Bomber Guy, Queen Christina, Frederick the Great, Plato, Piotr Tchaikovsky, Oscar Wilde, James Barrie, Grant Morrison, Utada, Elliot Page, Yu Watasi, and I could go on. While X-Men is a clunky allegory, it is still important to bring up these issues through film analysis and art. We've always been here, from all walks of life. Plus, this is not an exhaustive list. Even if you don't write about us, we're always here, and we will always be here. And if you don't like it, you've already been fucking around. Maybe it's time you found out.